What I'm going to tie here is an Isonychia Dry Fly and parachute style. And I start off with an Ahrex. It's a FW500 in size 12, traditional dry fly hook. And thread, a little different. It's going to seem a little strange maybe, but it's 12/0, very thin in white. And I'm going to leave at least a full eye length space behind the back edge of the hook eye and snip off the excess tag. For the tail on this fly, I'm using moose body hair. You don't need many. Isonychia have 3 tails. They're fairly short and not especially robust. So I'm just going to give a light stacking, get those tips aligned, pull them from my stacker. And again, fairly short tail. It's okay, there's a white one in there. That actually is going to look kind of cool. A little less than a hook shank in length. I'm going to get them anchored. The moose body hair will flare just a little bit. I'm going to pull up and toward me so it lands right on top of the hook shank as I wrap rearward. And I'm not going to go real tight on that last wrap. I don't want them to flare too much. And I do like to tie in the tail first, just so I get a really good measurement on that tail length. Now I'm going to use a polypropylene floating yarn, white polypropylene floating yarn wing post, just a card length free from the card. That's all you really need. And my whole parachute technique is a little different than most people. Anyway, I want to have my thread start right about where I want the base of the post to be. Maybe back just one more wrap like that. I'm going to take a small amount, doesn't matter how much. And with a pinch wrap, nice tight pinch wrap, I'm going to start wrapping rearward to bind that polypro right to the top of the hook shank. After a few wraps, I'm going to use my tying scissors to make an angled cut. This will help with the taper of the body of the fly later on. Then I'm going to wind my thread forward. I'm going to check. I really want the base of the wing post to be in a very specific place, at least a full eye length space back from the back edge of the hook eye. I'm going to clean this up just a little bit. Now here's the part where it really gets different. I'm going to locate my tying thread in front of that post. I'm going to take it and I'm going to twist the polypropylene clockwise as if I'm looking down on it. Really twist it up and then fold it over. And what's going to happen, it's going to furl up, kind of like a cinnamon twist, if you will. Then I'll bind it down there. And what that does is it makes a nice stiff wing post, and it also, you don't have fibers running all over the place. It can get trapped on your hackle when you go to wrap the hackle. And I want to snip this off at a shallow angle as well. Also, we've bound the polypropylene down in 2 places on the hook shank, so it doesn't want to spin as much as it does with other methods of tie-in. All right. Next step is the body, and this is a fine and dry Isonychia color dubbing. And we've already built up quite the little thorax on this, so we don't want to build it up too much. I want a very, very thin dubbing noodle. I'm going to pull up, get this dubbing parallel to my tying thread, put a little bit on, and continue down. You can see, I hope, just how thin a dubbing noodle I'm making here. And one of these slightly longer shanked hooks, I like a nice long but very, very slender dubbing noodle. It's surprising just how long the noodle needs to be to cover the whole body of the fly. And we're going to be covering from the base of the tail all the way up around the post to behind the eye. So I'm going to start taking wraps with the dubbing noodle. And I don't know whether you can see it here, but I like to wrap the body nice, even pressure all the way around with my tying thread. And you can see I've actually run out of dubbing. As long as that noodle was, I still don't have enough, so always easier to put more on than it is to take dubbing off. Just a little bit more on there. When you're wrapping really thin noodles like this, you need quite the big length of them in order to cover everything up that needs to be covered up. Always make sure that that space on the far side's covered. Looks good. Then I'm going to just take a single clockwise wrap around the base of the post, like so. All right, next is the hackle for the fly. So with this method, it really allows you to develop a nice, even, smooth body on the fly without having to deal with tying in hackle or anything like that. That comes next. Here I'm using this is kind of a medium done cape. I do like to always measure my feathers before I pluck them free from the cape. And with the shiny side facing me, I'm going to strip off any of the lower, really webby fibers. And this is measured right at a size 12. The other thing I'm going to do is just, again with the shiny side facing me, from the top edge of the stem, I'm going to strip off just a few more fibers. And what this is going to do is help to ensure that this feather wraps correctly. I'll put it against the near side of the post, and I'm going to take thread wraps to begin securing it. Do a little twist there up the post, but you might be able to see this because the post has so much structure to it already. I don't need any kind of a gallows attachment or anything like that. I can really just wrap around that post. I'm increasing the structure even more. Okay, now the weird part, and I hope this doesn't go off camera. Maybe we can make an adjustment if it does, but I'm going to rotate the fly about 90 degrees in my tying vise, like so. Then I'm going to get hold of my hackle pliers, get hold of the feather's very tip, and because I left that space there, I want that stem to contact the post first. Also notice that I've left my tying thread right there. So I'm going to wrap behind my tying thread. And that way it's pulling up on the weight of the bobbin with every wrap of this hackle. And that keeps those wraps sandwiched really close together. And I'm just going to keep on wrapping. I like these to be really well hackled. I fish them a lot towards dark and after dark. And I want them to be nice and floaty and visible on the water surface. And I'll just anchor that tip, the hackle feather's tip, above the hackle and snip the excess off nice and close. Okay, and then you have to be a little careful doing this, but I'm going to whip finish right there above the hackle going up the post. This is why I used white tying thread, so it blends in with the post. Seat those thread wraps and whip finish really tight. Snip that off, and then we're going to go back to our regular position in the tying vise. Happens. Okay, and all I have to do now really is snip that post off. I don't like the post real high, or it makes the fly top heavy and kind of wants to land funny sometimes, so I keep it fairly short but very visible. And importantly on this one, I'm going to take my head cement and I'm going to apply a small drop right to the thread wraps right there on top of the hackle. The good part about this is that that drop of head cement is going to not only seal up those thread wraps, it's also going to wick down the post and effectively lock those hackle wraps to the polypropylene stem. The other part, it's a little hard to notice here, but in wrapping this way, I can wrap so the cup of the feather is down as opposed to up like this. And this makes all these kind of downward pointing tips contact the water first, much in the way an adult insect's legs contact the water, create surface tension, which helps it to float. And so that's my parachute method. I can use it all the way down to size 24, but this is a size 12 ISO parachute. The other advantage is you may notice the underside of the fly is incredibly clean. There are no fibers pointing down, and that's what the trout sees. So Isonychia parachute, ready to fish.